You're watching City TV 20, the City of Danville's government access channel.
We are now in is the Institute for Sustainable and Renewable Resources, and joining me today is Barry Flinn, the director of this research lab. Barry, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
Now, Barry, I know a lot what you deal with is plant biology, and for our viewers at home, they're very familiar with the tobacco crops in our area have pretty much gone by the wayside here in Southern Virginia. And I know your lab and the research that you do is working with different types of plants and crops that maybe some of the farmers in our area one day will be able to grow in those same greenhouses and fields that once housed all the tobacco crop.
Yes. Because we're all plant biologists and we really wanted to try and build upon the really strong agricultural heritage of the region, when the program was set up, we decided to try and target using plant biology for both economic and community development. So we believe that we can probably do that, or we know that we can do that, through a variety of methodologies. One is use plant biology to develop new and novel types of crops, hopefully some of which will be grown by tobacco farmers either in their fields or using greenhouse facilities they have available here. Also, some of the materials and bioproducts that we can develop from using plant biology, we also hope to be able to have spin-off companies that could be used to produce products such as novel horticultural crops that could be produced through tissue culture, or also perhaps various plant-derived bioproducts as well. So,
now, what are some of the crops that you all are currently doing research on here in your lab?
Okay, well, it covers a really broad range of both horticultural and ornamental. So, for example, in the horticultural ornamental area, we have a lot of work where we're doing propagation, developing propagation methods for things like Helleborus hybrids, the Christmas roses, which are highly valuable ornamentals. We have work on developing novel types of daylilies that would be blooming more frequently and have more vigorous growth. We're also working on trying to develop disease resistance mechanisms for enhancing daylilies. We're also doing some work on developing thermotolerant or temperature-tolerant orchids. So those are some of the areas we're working on: developing propagation of native deciduous azaleas, native wildflower propagation. We're also looking at developing markers that could be used for breeding purposes to be able to breed more disease-resistant plants as well.
Now, do you have any local farmers that are working with you hand in hand in some of this research?
Well, currently we're developing a project with Ken Moss, who owns Piedmont Bioproducts up in Gretna and also has Windy Acres Nursery. That area we're primarily targeting with him is an area relating to biofuel, crops associated with biofuel production. So, for example, we're doing a lot of work here on switchgrass and miscanthus as grassy feedstocks that could be feeding into energy production. And we're going to be doing some work with Ken on developing ways that we can develop more rapid propagation methods for things like miscanthus or elephant grass, switchgrass, and also breeding our own varieties that would have enhanced biomass production.
And with the gas prices these days, alternative fuels are a hot topic not only in our region but across the country. So I think working with our local farmers in that area is a benefit to everyone.
Very much so. We're also, in terms of some of the ornamentals, we're also working with breeders, for example, in Clarksville, who work on the hellebores, and we're working closely with them and their germplasm or their plant backgrounds to be able to develop ways to propagate those sorts of plants. We're also working with other breeders in Virginia as well to try and develop novel types of plants that could be sold. One of the things we're planning on being able to do within the next year or so is actually spin off a tissue culture propagation company that would deal with some of the plants that we're producing here. And the idea is this company would be able to hire some local employees. We would be able to develop plants in our tissue culture facility. Hopefully, some of those we'll be able to feed to tobacco farmers who could take them from the tissue culture environment and grow them up to a liner stage in their greenhouses, and then could feed into the horticultural industry for sale. And also, hopefully, some of what we'll be developing in terms of the biofuel crops could also be propagated and developed in our tissue culture labs, the commercial lab, and then go into commercial sale as well.
So it all works hand in hand, a step-by-step process, a plan that you all have laid out here to assist our region in transforming our economy.
That's the goal anyway. So.
Well, I know you have a busy lab here. You have many staff members working hard here today, and what I'd like to do is maybe just pick one of the individuals out doing a little bit of the research and have you kind of go through a little step-by-step process of what they're particularly working on today.
Sure, sounds good. Okay, well, Mark, what we have here is one of our research lab technicians working on tissue culture of one of our biofuel crops, which would be switchgrass. So currently we're developing ways that we can propagate elite or superior genetic backgrounds of switchgrass, and ways that we can also possibly use the tissue culture background to induce new and novel types of genotypes or types of plants to be developed using the tissue culture process. So this is really interesting because really we have to start from the single cell level to regenerate new plants, hopefully be able to modify those so they can produce much higher yields of biomass that can feed into energy production. And it's a very time-consuming and laborious process, but eventually we hope down the road that we'll be able to develop new and novel types of switchgrass backgrounds here that could really be used to facilitate much better yield for bioenergy production. In addition to switchgrass, we also have similar sorts of projects starting with miscanthus. And also one of the areas I didn't mention earlier is a major program effort on Jerusalem artichoke as an alternative biofuel crop that could be used for soluble sugar production that could then feed into ethanol fermentation. And again, a lot of it starts off very similar. We have to do a lot of tissue culture work to be able to look at developing ways to breed plant varieties that have high yields of either soluble sugars or cellulosic biomass for fuel production. Mark, in this case, one of the areas I really didn't touch on earlier was a lot of the molecular genetics and the molecular biology and molecular breeding work that we're doing. So in this case here, we do a lot of work where we're trying to identify specific fragments of DNA from the plants that we're working with that might be associated with certain traits or characteristics. So for example, we might be looking for DNA markers that might be associated with disease resistance that would allow us to be able to use for breeding purposes, trying to find markers that might be associated with degrees or high levels of biomass production, and things such as that. Another area that we're really dealing with that relates to molecular biology is being able to identify proteins from plants that might have novel uses. For example, one of the projects that one of our scientists, Dr. Jiwoo Lee, has ongoing is looking at trying to be able to purify specific types of proteins from plants that might be able to be used for novel types of biofilm or biopolymer uses. So he's actually going in, purifying specific proteins from various plants and feeding these into our API program with Ron Moffitt, and they're looking at being able to take these purified proteins and actually spin them or develop them into polymers and then test their properties to see if we might be able to develop novel types of molecules or polymers that could be used for things such as food packaging, for potential biomedical uses, and maybe down the road there may be defense applications involved in these sorts of plant-derived polymers.
That's going to wrap it up for this week's edition of the City Manager Report. And it also concludes our overview of the research component here at the Institute for Advanced Learning and Research. But before we leave, I'd like to highlight the building here behind me is actually the new research addition that will be located in the Cyber Park right behind the Institute. It will house some of the labs that are currently housed at the Institute to give them a little more space to operate. And that will be opening soon. So be sure to join us next week for part 3 of our series on the Institute as we dive into 2 more of those strategy for successes that the Institute operates under. We'll be highlighting their higher education programs and also many of their community outreach programs they offer to all the citizens in the Dan River region. So be sure to join us next week as we highlight those.